What is up, you guys? It's like the 10th time I'm filming this intro because we're having technical difficulties over here, so excuse me. Today's video is a different type of video than what you're used to seeing over here on this channel. Basically, if you've been here for any amount of time, you know that I push shadow work like it's going out of style, okay? I am passionate and serious about shadow work, and you're gonna see today why. This is my first collab video. I collabed with a friend of mine that I met on Instagram who recently started a channel, and his channel name is The Order of Chaos. You can check him out down below. We also did a part 2 to this video over on his channel. So this video that you're watching right now is basically all about the shadow. What is the shadow? What is shadow work? How do you do it? We went super in depth about the shadow, so we got you. So if you've been feeling stuck in your spiritual journey or healing or anything, this is the video for you. Hopefully it is helpful for some of you guys out there. We also did part 2 over on his channel, like I said, where we went even more in depth into our own experiences with shadow work and why we're passionate about shadow work. And also you get to see why I'm not all love and light. Yeah, definitely make sure to go check out my friend, The Order of Chaos. He's super cool, especially if you're into like esoteric stuff and occult stuff, then he is your guy. And really quick, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the beast, Carl Jung, who coined the term shadow work and who is a big reason that we have this concept of shadow work to begin with. I don't know why I didn't mention this in my video, but I didn't. But I'm a huge fan of Carl Jung. But anyways, let's get into the video.
I guess let's just start by you introducing yourself. I feel like you'll be better at that than I will.
Yeah. My name is Tawny, and I am the owner/founder of the Order of Chaos. I am a chaos magician and a shamanic tarot reader and a student of occultism and esotericism in general. It's my life's passion, and specifically shadow work is a huge part of my passion, and a huge part of what I do with my clients and my students is helping them along this path from shadow to light.
That's awesome. That's a great introduction. And basically we met on Instagram, right? And just started kind of talking on Instagram. I would say that you became one of my friends. We have a lot of similar kind of interests and views, and also you have a lot of different perspectives and stuff that I think is very interesting. And I guess let's get into it. Like I said, I've never done this before. So I guess let's go into, so first I think we should talk about maybe why we want to talk about the shadow. I think that would be interesting. And then go into obviously like the basics of the shadow. What is the shadow? Why is it important? So basically I've been wanting to do this video for a while. I get a lot of questions like, still, what is shadow work? You know, what do I do in this situation? Why am I stuck in my life or in my path or in my spiritual path? Or, you know, I'm doing all the things and this, that, and the other. And I feel like shadow work around this time of year, it becomes like trendy to some people, and then it kind of goes away. And I also feel like a lot of people don't really truly understand what shadow work is. It is kind of a very broad spectrum of things, I think. The way that I have found shadow work and kind of what I call shadow work may be different to what other people call shadow work or what other people label as shadow work. And obviously it deals with the subconscious, which we're going to get into. But I think that in today's kind of culture or spiritual culture, it's like almost trendy to, you know, buy the crystals, to do the meditations, to get tarot cards and, you know, buy all this shit that really you don't need. And you don't need to be spiritual at all. I always say I'm not a crystal ass bitch, and people are like, well, why? You're spiritual, blah, blah. You don't need crystals to be, I don't need to know the names of every fucking crystal out there to be a spiritual person. You know what I mean? Like it has nothing to do with that. And so shadow work to me is where the actual work comes in. You know, I feel like a lot of people either get turned off from spirituality or get to a point where they get stuck in the mud, or where they feel like they're not going any farther, or things start happening and they freak out and they turn back and they go back to religion or their life before, you know, and I think a lot of it has to do with people don't want to do the work, or they don't even know, you know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people just don't even know that there's this whole other part to working on yourself that involves working on yourself. It sounds kind of simple, but it really is almost like going into your shit, your darkness, yourself, and really facing all of these things that you hide and that you repress and that you've been running from for years, because so many people are really not who they are authentically or vulnerably. They are who they project themselves as. And I love it. Like Ram Dass says this, says something along the lines of, I'll pretend that you are who you say you are, and you pretend that I am who I say I am. You know what I mean? And I love that. Like the way that he goes into the identity and the ego and all of that is just like freaking beautiful. I freaking love him. So I think a lot of it, I wanted to talk about this because I get a lot of questions still, and I do a lot of courses and I work with people one-on-one with that, with shadow work and stuff, but I've never actually went into a really detailed video diving deep within shadow work. So that's why I'm like really excited to do this, because I've been meaning to do this for a long time. Do you want to say anything about why we are doing this?
So it was about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, when you and I met, that I was making my departure from the love and light community, because it was you get to, it's great. When you first have your spiritual awakening, you kind of gravitate towards that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's cool. Especially if you're a depressed person, you kind of find this positivity that's like, wow, this is out there. I can be a part of this. This is really cool. But it kind of wears off after a time, like the magic of it. Like, let's say you just started reading tarot cards, or you just got into astrology. It becomes normal to you after a few months. And then you're like, I'm just the same person I was before. What's going on now? And then maybe you find yourself even more depressed, and you find that all the love and light rhetoric isn't really doing anything for you anymore. And that's because you need to do your shadow work. And that's like the next step. Like, we encounter this dark night of the soul after an initial spiritual awakening, and this happens to like everybody, man. And if you don't experience this, or let's say you do experience it but you get scared and you run away from it, it's really easy to run to everything is just love and light and positivity all the time, and that's your way of hiding from it. Mm-hmm. And that's not real, right? That's right. That's still spiritual egoism. So right. That's something that I really liked about you when a friend of mine first showed me one of your videos. I did one of your pick a card videos. It was dead on, and all of yours have been dead on for me ever since. Mm-hmm. I'm blown away by it. But so I got interested in you because you are always saying we're not all love, light, twin flames, and rainbows over here, because that's not really what this path is about, especially to me. So I define shadow work as the process of self-actualization through exploration and integration of your shadow side. And so people know what I mean by that. When I'm talking about the shadow, I'm talking about the place in your psyche that houses your demons. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it's, Jung called it the shadow, and it's very similar to Freudian's concept of the id. It's your subconscious. It's all that shit that you don't want to look at, but it's like looking into a black mirror. Mm-hmm. Okay. And seeing, here's these parts of me that I really don't like, or that, there's these things I'm very afraid of, or give me incredible anxiety. And you push that stuff down. And, people are figuring out now, like through this spiritual awakening process, that doesn't work. It never has worked. It always just comes right back at you. And if you push it down hard enough, then you've got like these monsters manifesting in your everyday life. Like, you're terrified of everything, or you're always depressed and everything seems like life is just hell. Mm-hmm. It's facing your shadow that alleviates that. Because so to me, like, the goal of shadow work is to wrangle those aspects of your psyche so that they don't control you, so that you have control over them. But, we talked about this earlier over Instagram. It's not about gripping it and saying, I've got control over you. It's about integrating it, facing yourself and saying, okay, I'm not maybe necessarily not just a terrible person. Maybe I need to face and integrate these parts of myself and become comfortable with them and see what they're all about, instead of turning away from it. Mm-hmm. And that's how you gain that level of interaction with it that you could call control.
Mm-hmm. That was like fucking beautiful, man. I don't think I could have said it better myself. That was like freaking Oscar performance right there. But so yeah, and that's why I always tell people that I work with, and I think I even told you, I always recommend that Netflix show Freud. And I don't know how real it is to Freud's journey, but it is apparently about Freud and his journey into figuring out about the subconscious and working with this girl, which this was back in the hysteria days, and where, men were labeling women as crazy and hysteria, they had hysteria, and because they were acting crazy, and really it was subconscious suppression of the subconscious and of the sexuality, which was leading to like crazy shit, like freaking superpower like shit. And they were like, whoa, like this is crazy. And so they just called them crazy and locked them up and this, that, and the other. And so Freud was working with this girl that's super powerful. He like is really into hypnosis, and he's hypnosing her. And at first he's trying to help her fight these demons, you know what I mean? And eventually, the way it ends, it's very much more so about integrating it, but it's a badass freaking show. But anyway, so yeah, it's funny because, and I'm going to talk more about that in the part 2 that we do over on your channel, but more about my experience into to spirituality. I would say maybe I kind of touched the love and light stuff a little bit, but it's kind of like, for me, it's always been dark. Like my kind of introduction into spirituality was very dark and very dualistic. It was all about balance and, opposition and polarity. It was very much about, the light and dark, and that the dark does not mean evil. And I do want to clarify that, because I know a lot of people, they hear the shadow or they hear the darkness or demons, and they automatically think evil. And I've had a lot of people want to know and ask this too, like, well, does this mean that if I work on my shadow self that I'm going to be, what if someone has like these, tendencies to want to hurt people or something, when they integrate that, what does that mean? But here's the thing. 100% of the time, people that are hurting people or living out these like very crazy actions or behaviors, 100% of the time, it's because they are suppressing things. They are fighting things, actually. And it's a conflict within them. When we are basically suppressing our shadow, when we are ignoring our shadow, when we are trying to control it, or we are trying to, in some way fight it, that is what leads to shitty behavior. It is not integrating it, because you're not integrating necessarily the part of you that wants to hurt people. You're finding the root underneath of that, because it's not that you really actually want to hurt people. So that's a manifestation. Underneath of it, it's because you're hurt yourself and you don't want to feel that. And so it's easier for you to hurt other people. And that's why I think the shadow can be confusing. And I think that's why it only picks up a little bit of trend during like Halloween. You know what I mean? Because when you hear the shadow, just the term, the shadow, it's dark. You know what I mean? And we're in a community that really, the love and light part of it is trendy. But like you said, that gets old after a while. You know what I mean? How many times are you going to watch tarot readings and constantly hear your twin flame is coming, your twin flame is coming. He's coming next week. He's on his way, divine timing, just wait, like how many times are you going to do that before you're finally like, I don't believe this anymore. You know what I mean? Like bullshit. He's not fucking coming. You're fucking lying, And I get it. It's general readings, and I'm not trying to like make fun of anybody here, but I get it. I do get it, because in a way, although I didn't really have I didn't really dive into the love and light community, I did spend my whole life escaping darkness, but the way that I was escaping it only brought it on more. And I love the term, the bigger the light, the stronger the shadow. The more you walk towards the light, the bigger your shadow gets. So, and that's actually true. We see that. That's like a physical thing. You know what I mean? And I feel like physical things, just in the sun and the moon, we have day and night. We have a tide that, goes in and out, right? When we breathe, we inhale and we exhale. There's always restriction. There's always the other opposite, right? Like one cannot be defined, unless the opposite exists, right? So for one to be defined, the opposite exists, actually is how it goes. But so I really feel like when we chase light, we only end up with more darkness. And things like this, when you really start doing work on yourself, you really end up realizing how counterintuitive shit is. Because when you go into your shadow and you go through those painful, hurtful, emotional, traumatic things that you've been repressing, you actually find the light. You actually find the love, the forgiveness, the unconditional amount of source energy that you've been looking for, the divine energy that you've been looking for. And there's another quote that I love. I believe it's by Rami. I can't remember exactly, but the divine or God or something, light enters through the wound. Something enters through the room, through the womb, but it's something to do with light. And so I feel like, you know, it's easy to ignore because it deals with the shadow, and nobody wants to actually look at themselves. And tell people this all the time. The problem with our fucking world is not probably what you think it is. It's because no one wants to look at themselves. No one. I mean, there's a reason that I feel like, you know, we can't look at ourselves anyway without a mirror, but that was something that was created eventually, right? So we really can't look at ourselves. Like, we can't see our own eyes. We can't see, you know, the way our face looks or whatever, you know what I mean, without something else. And so this is why we have relationships with people to almost mirror behaviors and actions and feelings within us. And so our relationships end up becoming a mirror. And a lot of the times people don't actually realize what they're hanging on to until they're in relationships, whether they're romantic or otherwise, you know what I mean? And yeah, I completely agree with everything that you've said so far. So that's basically why we want to talk about shadow work. So let's go into what is the shadow. I know you've kind of defined it already, but do you want to go more into that?
I'll get more into that for sure. So understanding that the shadow is a part of you, right? Something you'll see a lot in the love and light community is this idea that your shadow is bad and that your ego is bad. And these are parts of you that you have to shun and get rid of. And that's repressive and it's oppressive. And a really great example of why you should never fucking do that are Catholic priests who molest little boys because they have so much repression in them and they've spent their whole lives denying this part of themselves, and they become these monsters that probably don't even realize it. And so the shadow is the part of you that at any point makes you say, why did I do that? You know, if you have no idea why you did something, it's because your shadow self like gets a hold of you at some moment, and all of a sudden you're doing something that you wouldn't, you think, oh, I'm a good person, I would never do that. And then that's a lot of how people will play it off. Like, I must not have done that. It must not be real. Or, you know, they just repress it further instead of dealing with like the underlying cause, like you were saying. So like the shadow is almost, you know, this is such a simplification, but like you have an angel on your shoulder and you have a devil on your shoulder, right? Well, they're both there. They're both real and they're equal to each other. And if you just ignore the devil, eventually he's going to grab you. So yeah, that's really kind of what it is to me. And it corresponds to like your moon sign, for example, in astrology, or your demons, if you're more into, there's so many modalities to deal with this. You could think of your shadow as your lower chakras. You could think of it as your demons rather than your angel. You could think of it as your moon sign. You could think of it as the part of your subconscious that is repressed. You know, it is all of those things. They're just different languages to describe the same thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, you know, I've seen it also play out with Pluto, your IC and your chart. I've seen it play out in your 12th house. I've seen it play out in your 7th house. I've seen it play out in your ascendant sign, because essentially your ascendant sign is something that you kind of grow into as a child. Deals with your early development as a child. So it's kind of like the personality that you take on because of the environment that you're in. So for example, quick example, like a Virgo rising. I've noticed this about Virgo risings. Normally, or even Libra risings sometimes, or Capricorn risings. Normally they have a really rough childhood, rough start to life. They're especially Virgo risings, and they can be almost treated as the either grow up too quick, treated as the servant at a young age, someone that has to clean the house or be responsible or be in service to their siblings or their parents in some way. Or even like a Cancer rising, maybe they have to be the mother or take on this maternal kind of energy at a very young age. And then like Capricorn risings, like having to grow up or be very adult and mature from a young age. And then back to Virgo risings, very much having to it's kind of sad. It's like Virgo risings I always feel for, because it's almost like they're pushed to the side, or because Virgo can be a very humble kind of sign. And it's almost like at times a lot of the Virgo risings that I've worked with and met have had kind of like childhoods where it's like they were pushed aside, or they didn't have a lot of money, or they, just they had to grow up in an environment where they were literally like a servant, or just someone that was like neglected or pushed to the side a lot. And so I've seen it come out in that as well. I've seen it because I was looking into what the shadow would be in the birth chart back in like the beginning of like 2019. And I actually found this really good article on Black Moon Lilith. And this girl wrote, she was talking about Black Moon Lilith as the shadow. And yeah, I did think a lot of it resonated, but she went into each sign and the shadow of each sign. And I went into that in one of my courses. So because I thought it was really interesting, because then I started realizing I related to a lot of them. But I only had Black Moon Lilith and Capricorn. So I was like, why do I relate to Cancer, Pisces? And, and so I feel like we can almost have a shadow side of each planet or each house from what I've seen. But I think the main ones are like your moon, your IC, because these are very sensitive, emotional points of the chart. And the 12th house, the rising, I think, and also the 7th house, because it's literally your reflection in others, so, and your descendant, so yeah, it's very interesting. So my kind of definition of the shadow, I really actually don't think I've thought about like a set definition for it, but the way that I kind of describe it is when you're, first off, deals with the subconscious. It deals with the shit. Our brain is so fascinating, first off, so amazing. So, I mean, I just can't get enough of learning about the brain. And I feel like we're about to make freaking tons of progression with the brain, with entering into this era of air. But the brain has a part of it that is the subconscious. And because the conscious, the light part of your brain that you're aware of can only handle so much. So when something traumatic happens to you, and trauma, let me define trauma really quick, because a lot of people hear trauma and they immediately think rape, abuse, something physical or crazy, but it's not always that. And I tell people trauma can literally be something that didn't happen. Like let's say you had parents that weren't around a lot or didn't pay a lot of attention to you. I have a couple of clients right now that have this. They're like, my childhood seemed great. We had a great house, so I don't know why I'm like this, you know what I mean? But it's like, well, what wasn't there that you needed? You know what I mean? And so, but trauma can be literally, I tell people this all the time, your mom being late to pick you up from school one day and you think that she abandoned you. Trauma is literally just like some kind of internal blow up, some kind of internal reaction to an external circumstance. So when we look at it like that, it can literally be a broad spectrum of things. You know what I mean? It could be the kid that made fun of you in second grade. It can be, the kid that, wouldn't kiss you in middle school. It can be all kinds of different things, and these are just kind of small examples, but it really depends on your inner reaction to them. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. It can be your parents not showing you a lot of emotion, growing up. That's kind of what happened with me. I struggle with emotion because my parents weren't very emotional. And I was in a household where when there was emotion, it was aggression and violence and all of that. So it wasn't like, here, let me address what you're feeling. You know what I mean? It was more so crazy. So, I mean, it can and we also repress things when trauma happens, because as children, when we're growing up, our brains are still growing. So when something happens, it's like we don't know how to handle that or process that as a child. And naturally, our nervous system will try to protect us. So we basically shove it down. You know what I mean? And we use our imagination. We try to forget about it. We act like it didn't happen. We try to go to school. We try to, do what we can to not feel it, because it's so painful and we're so young. But in return, that trauma becomes something subconscious. It moves to the darker part of our brain that really controls most of what we do, our habits, our patterns. And I always ask people, have you ever been driving down the road one day and all of a sudden you realize, holy shit, I've been driving this whole time. Where was I for the past like 5 minutes? You know, like your mind just wanders. And then you like come back and you come to and you realize, holy shit, I've been driving. Like, how did I know where to turn, where to stop, what to, where to go around, where to get over? That's the subconscious, basically. That's the subconscious. If you can do something without even thinking about it, your subconscious is in control of your habits and patterns. And so that's why a lot of people will sit there and be like, why do I keep getting with the same kind of guy? Why do I keep ending up in this same kind of situation? Why do I keep feeling this way? Because it's a subconscious habit or pattern or cycle that you pushed to the side a long, long time ago and forgot about. You know what I mean? And so that is kind of how I define the shadow. It really is in your subconscious. It deals with your patterns. It deals with your feelings, unhealed wounds, traumas, emotions, belief systems that you have, the way that you view things. And your subconscious is literally like the filter. You are viewing life and people and everything that happens to you. It's like the filter that you're viewing that through. And so when you have these shadow aspects and these shadow beliefs and traumas that you are looking through, you're going to look at things a certain way. And that's why when the girl comes to us, the girl that's in an abusive relationship, and she's drop dead gorgeous and she has a great job and a great career and everything like that, but she can't leave this piece of shit guy. And we're like, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? And it's like, and she doesn't know either, but she just can't leave. Like that's the shadow. It's like you don't see it yourself and other people are like, what the hell? I don't get it. You have to almost go through and heal yourself, because that girl, for whatever reason, has a belief system that that's what she needs and that's what she's worth. And just because everybody else can see that she's worth more, it doesn't matter. She has to see that she's worth more. And until she does that and does the healing work and the shadow work, she's going to keep either being with that guy or getting with someone just like him that represents the same thing, living out this trauma. And I'll give a lot more examples of how this happens when we get to part 2 on your channel, because I have tons of examples in my own life of how this is played out. But anyway, so I think that's everything I think about kind of defining the shadow. I feel like maybe I might be missing stuff, but I guess let's get into, if I think of anything else, then I'll bring it up. But I guess let's get into why is it important and how I kind of got into this, but and how it kind of affects our lives. Why is it important / how it affects our lives? Or if there's any points that you have that you want to make before we move on. Or...
No, let's get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's a great place to start with shadow work. Okay. And this is going back to what you were just saying. If something triggers you, it's because at some point in your life, you pushed a traumatic event or something, or like you're saying, even something that didn't happen, something that traumatized you, you pushed it out of your conscious awareness and into your subconscious mind, and you made it automatic, because that's what your subconscious does. It's the part of you that blinks and beats your heart and grows your hair. It's all the automatic parts of you. So when you push trauma from your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, you make the repetition of that trauma an automatic response. Something triggers you as an adult. Yeah, if something triggers you as an adult, it's the thing to do. And I understand the concept of safe spaces and all that, and maybe that's something you need in the very beginning when you're starting to recognize what your triggers are, but it's the opposite of shadow work, okay? And I'm not saying you should run out there and trigger yourself till you're like a mess. Of course not. You do want to deal with your triggers so that they no longer trigger you. Right? That's shadow work, is dealing with your triggers.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah.
So this is another example that I use to my current workshop members right now. We're almost done with the workshop, but basically say that you hate, like literally hate the color red, right? And you're out and you see this girl walking down the street in a red dress and you're triggered and you're like, fuck her. And so you run up to her and you're like, you shouldn't wear the color red. Which, yeah, this is like a really kind of small example, but this is what people do in other contexts, in larger contexts, right? Like, you shouldn't vote for this person, or you shouldn't like this person. You know what I mean? Whatever. But So they run up to this girl and they're like, yeah, you know, you shouldn't wear that color. It really offends me. And this is why, blah, blah, blah. You might get that girl to not wear that dress anymore or to not wear the color red anymore. But what are you going to do after that every time you see someone with the color red on? Are you going to think that, do you really think you're going to be able to convince all of them to suit your needs and make your world easier by not wearing the color red? And why are you giving them that power in the first place? You know what I mean? That's like an active example of you're saying that they have the power to make you feel better. When really all you would really need to do, which is the hard part, know that no one wants to do a lot of the times in the world that we live in, but is to look at why you don't like the color red, why it offends you, why it triggers you so much, and to face that instead of constantly running after people and fighting people that wear the color red. You know what I mean? And that's just a really plain, kind of stupid example, but that's literally what we do. You know what I mean? If you don't like the word bitch, or you don't like, you know, whatever, and every time you hear that word, do you expect out of all the people in this world that say that word, do you think they're all going to stop saying it to please you? You know, how about you take your power back and you're like, you know what? I'm going to face this, because then that word won't even bother me, and I won't expect everybody else to change to suit me. You know what I mean? And so that's just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying.
Yeah. And also, it seems it's counterintuitive, because an aspect of your shadow, which is your fear, will tell you that working on yourself is just too hard. And so you lash out at everyone. But stop and think for a moment. What sounds harder, controlling yourself or the rest of the world? Control yourself. It's way easier to control yourself than it is to control everybody around you. That's impossible. You don't have a right to do it. You don't have the ability to do it. You have no chance at doing it. But you do have a really good chance at learning to control yourself. In fact, it's not nearly as hard as it seems like it might be.
Right. It is. It's like it almost, with the way that a lot of people act today, especially on like platforms like Twitter, like I can barely log on there because I'm like, people's shadows are just like everywhere. But it does almost seem like, I guess it's easier for people to like point the finger and blame people and go after people than it is for them to look at themselves. Because if they look at themselves, then they realize, maybe I'm not right. You know what I mean? And that's so hard for people to admit. Maybe I'm not right. Maybe I'm insecure. Maybe I feel not good enough. Maybe I feel left out. Maybe I feel, you know, stupid or bad or ugly or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's so much harder for people to look at and face than it is to blame someone else, to point the finger. But those same people are really miserable, because you have to be very unhappy with yourself to do that. And when we all are always like, the shadow doesn't go anywhere, because we always have a subconscious. We can heal aspects of our shadow and become more integrated, but there's always going to be, and I always say this, like, we're a masterpiece. Like, we are each a work of art. You're not going to meet someone more interesting than yourself in your life. And if you think that, it's because you're not seeing things clearly. You don't realize your own, you know, beauty and your own masterpiece within you. But we are the most interesting, complex people. And so in a way, because some people was like, oh, well, if I can never heal my shadow, then why even try? Or that's am I always going to be doing shadow work? And it's like, no, you don't have to constantly be doing shadow work. It's not something you have to constantly work at every single day. But when things come up, if you know how to do shadow work, you'll know how to do it. You know what I mean? And you can get through it that much quicker than you would if you were to repress it, ignore it, fight it, drown it out with drugs or alcohol or whatever, and then just project it onto someone else, because projection and blaming and pointing the finger and going after people and all of that are symptoms of an unhealed wound. It's really the person that is hurting and they want to project it onto other people. And once again, I think we'll probably get more into that in part 2 when we talk about our experiences. But anyways, go on.
Yeah, so one of the tool for me that helps me with all of this, like the master key, is just remembering that you are the creator of your own reality. And that's a fact, right? Mm-hmm. You exist inside the story that your brain tells itself. And if you're telling it a shitty story, you're gonna have a shitty time. And that's just the way it is. And everything in your exterior world is a reflection of your interior world. And I had this I'll get more into this on the other one because that's when we're sharing more. But when you meet somebody that reflects everything back to you that you dislike about yourself, that's such an opportunity for you to say, I don't want to be like this person. Recognize it within yourself, and then you don't have to, at least in my experience, you don't have to do like this intense work. You just have to have the realization, I don't want to be this way. And then know that it's going to take time, but you just start gravitating towards being the person you want to be. And I think that most people will find that they want to be a good person, that they want to be, I'm not going to define what a good person is, but whatever it is to you, like you don't want to feel bad about yourself. No one's into feeling bad about themselves.
Right.
So when you meet someone and you have all this judgment towards them, like realize that you're projecting, that these are parts of you that you need to heal, and be like, wow, I don't want to, okay, cool. I'm not going to be that way. I see the opportunity for change. Right.
And here's the thing. I do want to say this because I meet a lot of people that I think actually a big cause of the shadow is the need to be good or loved or whatever. From what I've noticed, let's say you're a child and your parents don't like that you, I don't know, let's say that you're real creative. Let's use something simple. Let's say that you're real creative and you decide as a child that you have dreams of becoming an artist when you grow up. But let's say that your parents are super strict and all about working hard. And, if you work hard, that's what pays the bills and this, that, and the other. And so they're like, if you want to be a good and successful person in life, you can't be an artist. Like you need to go to school, you need to become a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. And this, that, and the other. So the kid either will rebel against the parents and still have trauma related to, I will never, own the side of me that's like my parents because screw them. Or what normally happens is the kid will end up repressing the side of it that is creative and the talents. And that's what you would call, or what Carl Jung would call, a light shadow. Something that is more of the lighter, like a talent or a gift, rather than like an insecurity or a fear or, a wound or whatever. So it's still a wound, but it's more of like a lighter wound. So basically the kid represses everything creative about him or her and then goes on to follow what the parents want because they think that's what makes them a good and successful person. And that's what's going to get them in with the parents. That's what's going to make them feel loved and supported by the parents, because doing art doesn't do that. You know what I mean? They feel outcasted by their parents. They feel rejected or whatever by their parents. So they fit in instead to feel that connection. And so that's also sometimes counterintuitive because a lot of people repress those parts of themselves because they're trying to act like a good person, when in reality, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I talk a lot about this to my workshop members. It's a lot of the time, the thing that we think that we are trying, like, it's like the person that's scared of rejection. So they get into relationships and they're super insecure and they're scared that someone's going to reject them. So they reject first. Screw you. They reject first. And eventually that person's like, you know what? No, screw you. And they leave. And then the person's like, see, I knew it. They were going to reject me. You know what I mean? But they pushed them to that. By trying to not allow themselves to be rejected, they ended up being rejected, right? And so it ends up becoming a self-fulfilling thing. Almost every shadow trait I've ever seen is some kind of self-fulfilling thing. And it's all because we live in this society that that completely condemns shadow aspects in the first place. You can't be independent. You can't worry about you. You can't worry about your identity. You can't be scared or grieve. You know what I mean? Everyone always wants to try to take the pain away and, let's put you on medicine and let's do this and do that. And so I feel like we kind of live in this society where the good person thing is like a belief that everybody has. And it's compared to something that's not even real, because no one is perfect. And I feel like everybody is inherently, good, depending on what you call good, and everybody's definition may be a little bit differently. But a lot of it is we're brainwashed to think this is good and this is bad. You know what I mean? And it can be as simple as you're upset and you're crying. and everybody's going to tell you, you're crazy, you shouldn't be crying, what's wrong with you, you shouldn't feel that way, and blah blah. No, just like, let me cry. You're basically telling me my feelings aren't valid and that it's not okay for me to be crying over this, you know what I mean? And so I do feel like the good person thing can be actually a reason that people repress certain aspects of themselves, because they fear that they're not going to fit in. You know what I mean? They're not going to fit into a group or a family or friends or a workplace or whatever if they show this certain part of themselves that people may think is weird or quirky or different or unlikable in some way. So I did want to kind of touch on that really quick.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that there is no objective standard of what makes a good person or what good and bad are. Right? These are just they're dualistic concepts, and they're real to the individual, but they're not the same for everybody at all. And
Right.
one of my biggest pet peeves within the love and light community is this idea, and it's pushed in so many different circles. Oh my God, this idea that service to self is bad and service to others is good. But there's a fundamental misunderstanding there. You're making a distinction between self and other. And
Right.
I mean, for me, there is no distinction. And that's the great realization, that there is no distinction between me and you. We're all part of the same energy. And, on top of that, the greatest gift you can ever give to the world is your authentic self. The greatest good you can ever do for the world is to be your authentic self. It's not to live up to some standard. It's to be the real you doing what you're here to do. And that is something that every individual needs to discover for themselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Basically, with what we've touched on, it's important because it literally affects your life without you even realizing it. You're chasing your own tail half the time and don't even realize it. You know what I mean? You're in some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have a lot of shitty days, if you're depressed a lot, basically anything that triggers you, anything that is really bothering you, any kind of fear, any kind of relationship issues that you are coming across, all somehow link into your shadow. All of it does. Even stuff that's not there. Let's say you're feeling a lack of purpose or meaning. Let's say, like, yeah, your life's cool, good. From the outside looking in, you got the job, the husband, the kids, the car, the status, whatever, whatever's important to you. That's what's important to most people these days. But let's say you still feel like you're missing something. You know what I mean? That deals with your shadow. So it's important because I feel like everybody could literally benefit from doing shadow work. Sometimes I say it's not for everybody. And what I mean by that is it's not for people that are not ready to look at themselves. And and I only say that because I've seen a lot of people think that they're ready to look at themselves. And then when they get there, they're like, oh shit, no, I changed my mind. You know what I mean? This isn't what I thought it was. Never mind. And they don't end up wanting to do the work on themselves. And that's fine. They're just not at that point in their life. And they may not be here to do shadow work. This is why everyone's not doing shadow. This is why not everybody is into spirituality. This is why not everybody is into, helping themselves or, learning about themselves or whatever, because some people, I personally believe, are here to walk a different path for whatever reason. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's not going to be everybody's thing, but I feel like people that are into spirituality really need to know about this if they're serious about learning about themselves and serious about continuing to grow spiritually in their lives. And so it affects our lives in all areas of our lives. Like I said, it's like a filter we're looking through to see our reality and to see our life. And it also affects how we feel about ourselves. It affects our self-love, our self-confidence. It affects our relationships with other people. It affects our relationships with our family, our parents. It affects our jobs, our purpose, our meaning, our passions, our relationships with children. Like, it literally affects all areas of our lives. And when you really start getting in, you really start noticing how it just branches out like a web to everything in your life. And you're like, wow, this one thing that I've been not wanting to face in myself for so long has literally been controlling every decision I've ever made in my life. You know what I mean? And it gets like that real. And I've had people get to that realization themselves, and it's so awesome to see. And they're like, wow, like, this is literally this, I've been avoiding this, and it's what I've built my whole entire life off of. You know what I mean? Anyway, so unless you have any other points or anything you want to touch on, the next one is basically, what is shadow work? which I feel like we've kind of touched on, but do you want to go into anything else with that or anything else before we get, my last one is basically, how do you do it after that? So,
No, let's get to how you do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different ways.
Yeah, definitely. First, I'll say real quick, what is shadow work? So we've talked about the shadow, but what is shadow work actually? I believe that the way that I have experienced it myself and went into it myself, and the way that I kind of guide other people through it, is basically when you start taking that journey into the subconscious, and this involves becoming very, very aware of yourself, of your dislikes, of your triggers, of the people that trigger you and their characteristics, of your childhood, what was there or what wasn't there, like I said. And basically understanding the subconscious patterns and cycles that you find yourself in that drive you, the subconscious motivations that drive you, whether it's a fear, whether it's a trauma, whether it's a belief system, whether it's an emotion that you've been avoiding all these years. And it's really kind of going back, and it really is, like, I've heard a lot of people compare it to peeling an onion, and I would have to agree. It is very much like going through layers. And you just get a little bit deeper every time. And you're basically finding the root of where this cycle pattern or, subconscious motivation started for you, where this wound or trauma started for you, which is somewhere in childhood, even if we think it isn't. A lot of the times people come to me and they want to know, what's up with my relationship right now? My childhood was fine. There's nothing there. What's going on with this right now? And I'm like, no, wait a minute. I'll help them focus on what's going on right now, but then I'll eventually will take it back to childhood. And every single time they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I never realized it like that. I never thought of it like that before. It's really about doing the work to face the things, the subconscious things. Now, this is not always easy. You really have to be aware, like I said, and you really have to allow yourself to be triggered, to judge, to do all the things that, we try not to do, but we do anyway, you know what I mean? And you have to be aware in those moments, and really kind of dissect it. What's triggering me about this? Why am I scared of this? Because it doesn't have to just be a person. It could be a situation. It could be a money situation or a job situation. It's really dissecting it in that moment to really figure out what exactly is going on underneath. And that's where you get into the subconscious, because your ego will try to hide it from you. I've seen it so many times. The ego tries to throw shit at you. Oh, you're just scared that he's going to leave you. And I'm like, no, that's not what you're scared of. That would be a manifestation of what you're really scared of. But you're really scared of how it's going to make you feel. You know what I mean? You're really scared it's going to trigger that thing in you that already feels that way. And it's going to prove it right. You know what I mean? So that's where you got to writing really, really helps, because it helps get you out of your head and cement it on paper. So yeah, that's kind of some ways that I would answer what is shadow work. Unless you want to add anything else to that, then we can kind of get into how do you do it.
No. Yeah, let's get into how you do it. Because that was a great refresher explanation. And it's necessary because this is a really nuanced topic. It's complicated. It's not simple at all. And so for me, most people who experience, if you're fortunate enough to have a spontaneous sort of spiritual awakening, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this channel have experienced that, one of the things that happens to you is you immediately realize that there is not just one of you. Okay, there's not just one voice in your head, there are many. And and when you start to separate them from each other and label them, in fact, and that's what Aleister Crowley says in the Goetia, that the demons of the Goetia are parts of the brain. Wrap your head around that, and then there's 72 of them, and there's also 72 angels in the Shemhem Parash. Now, for most people, most of their lives, there's only one voice, and it's overwhelming, and it's the ego, and it's listening to all the other voices and synthesizing something and kind of telling you how to act, right? But the process of dissecting yourself in a mental way, and I do this through meditation, just separating out the voices and then starting to pick and choose who you want to listen to. That's kind of my starting point for doing the work.
That's interesting. Yeah, I also believe and kind of teach in my courses and workshops and one-on-one clients and stuff that there are different sides to us, that there are literally different, almost different personalities, different identities that we take on depending on who we're around, depending on our mood, how we're feeling, you know what I mean? A lot of the time, anytime we're facing fear, indecision, conflict, whatever, anytime we're feeling uncomfortable within ourselves, it is normally always the result of some kind of inner conflict going on. It's, you have one side that wants this and one side that wants that, one side is fearful, the other side isn't, you know what I mean? And so it's always some kind of inner conflict. So I definitely agree with that, and really paying attention to these different sides of who you are and how you act in certain different situations, and the different things that you think about yourself, or that you think about other people, or that you say to yourself, or that you feel. And that's another thing. I think feeling is a big thing. I don't think we just have emotions for no reason, because they're just these gross things that we have to deal with because we're human. Like, I think they're there for a reason, and they're energy, you know what I mean? So, and this is how I think people get so screwed up in the first place, is when you have a traumatic experience, all of that emotional energy, your nervous system, you suppress. And that energy doesn't just go away just because you get a temporary relief from it. Doesn't go away. You know what I mean? And the memory of it and the feeling of it gets stored as memory inside of your subconscious. The energy gets stored somewhere in your body. I've literally done work on my body and myself where I've released energy from that was stored in muscles in my body from past traumas. And I've seen people do it too. And so, or like I would release energy and be flooded with memories of like a past event. So it's energy. So energy can't be destroyed, so it goes in your body, and you're carrying this energy around with you. And that's why every time something, a relationship or whatever situation triggers that feeling or that memory, that subconscious event that you have stored, that's why a trigger happens in the first place. Because those feelings that you've stored now, that your nervous system is protecting you from, it starts coming back up, and you get flooded, and you're triggered, and you're like, holy shit, and you start getting anxiety, and all this stuff starts happening. And that is stored energy and data in your shadow. I definitely agree that there's different sides of us. We all have our little child part of us too. Really deep down, we're all little children. You know what I mean? Just trying to act like we're not. At the end of the day, we really all hide our vulnerabilities and our perceived weaknesses and the things that we don't like about ourselves, and our insecurities, and it all really does go back to the child and all of that.
So it's that negative self-talk that you developed from your parents or your teachers in school or whatever it is. It's the adults in your life as a kid who, told you you're not doing this well enough, or you should be different in some way, right? You really internalize that. And then as an adult, those are the things you tell yourself. And I don't know if it's the same for everyone out there, everyone's brain works differently, but I would always hear it in the voices of those people. And so I would think like, man, those people, it's them. But then you got to realize, no, like you're creating these voices in your head. They're not there anymore. You haven't seen these people in years and years and years. It's you.
Yeah, that's what I tell people that I work with when they're telling me like, yeah, my mom always used to tell me like, I needed to do better, and I needed to do this and do that. And so I'm like, yeah, and that's what you tell yourself now too, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, so you have a side of you that is like your mom now, that is constantly like drill sergeant in you, basically. That's I just remembered what I was like, the point I was getting to before I lost it. But emotions, like a lot of people don't want to deal, and I get it. I'm an Aquarius moon. I freaking ran all my life from freaking emotions with drugs and all kinds of shit. Like I did not want to feel. I wanted to numb the F out all the time. So I completely get it. And so it's so ironic now. It's just the irony that I'm like all teaching and into like helping people to like deal with their emotions and heal through their emotions and all of that. But anyway, so a lot of the time people think that also shadow work is kind of just having a realization or realizing what you're doing, and then you'll stop. But that's not always the case, because you've developed this habit, this pattern. So it's second nature. Just like when you constantly repress your emotions, you'll notice if you start going to feel your emotions when they come up, that your body or your mind now automatically represses them before you can even think about feeling them, before you even realize that you were having an emotion. That's what happened to me. Like I would realize it after I would repress it. And I would be like, holy shit, because that's what I was it's subconscious, you know what I mean? And so I would have to like bring it back up and like let myself feel it, like, hold on a minute, like come back here. And so it really is like, you have to really be aware of your patterns. And another good way to start shadow work that I always tell everybody, and if, the people that work with me know this, that I'm so big about this. Like I drill it into their heads, because people don't even realize how brainwashed we are that emotions are bad. Like literally, it's in everything. It's in the shows we watch, the people we're around. It's in, why are you crying? Why are you being a crybaby? You're so emotional. Those things are the reasons that we repress our emotions, and also medications, and I'm not necessarily saying anything bad about people that are on them. I get there are certain circumstances and all of that, and people have different paths, you know what I mean? But it's like, you go to a doctor because you're having an emotional experience or you're depressed or whatever, and it's like, here's meds, you need to numb them out, you know what I mean? And it's just like, everything is about numbing you out now, and it's like not about actually feeling it. And I get it, it sucks. Emotions can feel so fucking like they're fact a lot of the time, you know what I mean? They can literally feel like you're dying sometimes, like certain emotions can literally feel like, this is it, this is my life, it's never going to get better, I'm never going to feel better. I've been there, you know what I mean? But it does get better, you know what I mean? But I always tell people, one of the first things I tell people, start feeling your feelings. That's why they're there. That's why they're called feelings, because you're supposed to feel them, like when you have something come up, no matter how uncomfortable or no matter how comfortable it is, feel it, you know what I mean? Because it's there for a reason. And you actually, when you start doing this, you realize that you move through situations quicker than you would if you were to repress the feeling and fight the feeling. Because when you fight the feeling, you're literally fighting it for weeks, months, years, and it's still there. It's still going to come back up the next time something triggers it. You know what I mean? But when you actually go into the feeling and you allow yourself to feel how you're feeling and you make it okay, that's another thing. It's like, you don't try to replace it with some positive affirmation or something. You know what I mean? Like, no, you make it okay to have a bad day. You make it okay to feel like shit. You make it okay to be depressed that day. You make it okay to feel insecure. You know what I mean? When you do that, you actually become more empowered, because you're integrating that part of you that feels that way instead of opposing it. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the times when we feel insecure, it's like, well, I'm just going to go put some makeup on, and I'm just going to go talk to this guy, and I'm just going to go do this, and I'm just going to go do that. You know what I mean? And it's like immediate, like an immediate reaction to just like shoving it, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to cry this out, or I'm going to scream this out, or I'm going to run this out, or I'm going to dance this out, or I'm going to, bawl like a baby in the fetal position for an hour and feel this. And I'm just going to let myself feel insecure, because that's how I feel. And it's okay. It's there for a reason. It's trying to tell me something. You know what I mean? It's not bad. It's not the bad guy. And I actually wrote like a whole blog on emotional healing and how to use emotions to heal and stuff. So where I went into like a lot more detail, but we judge the emotion right away. This is bad. I don't want to feel this. This sucks. I don't want to feel this. You know what I mean? Going through a breakup. This sucks. I don't want to feel this. I feel brokenhearted. I feel not good enough. Why wasn't I good enough? I feel abandoned. What if he didn't like me? What if it was all a lie? I don't want to feel this. Let me go drink. Let me move on. Let me, work it off. It's like, no, just feel it. Because then a year from now, that breakup isn't still biting you in the ass. You know what I mean? Or, who knows, 12 years from now, 50 years from now, that breakup isn't still biting you in the ass. You know what I mean? And so when you actually feel it, it's like that week or that 2 weeks, or sometimes that hour or that few days is so much shorter compared to all the years you're going to spend trying to fight it and trying not to feel it. And spent avoiding it. Every relationship you get in now, you're going to be avoiding feeling like that. And therefore, you're going to be in a self-fulfilling prophecy where you almost like push yourself to that point. Because when we have a belief system, we subconsciously try to prove it right. We subconsciously bring on the belief system without even realizing it.
So what kind of happens, and what I've noticed, is that when you repress your emotions, you repress all of them. You can't choose to repress all your pain and then not also repress your joy, because you just don't want to feel anything, like you were saying. So you start repressing all of it, and then you inhibit yourself from ever feeling joy. And what's totally normal to do for everybody is to have such a fear of pain that we trade temporary pain that really wouldn't be so bad for prolonged suffering that's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
We're just fighting it. It's just like you were saying, like I remember the last time I was horrifically depressed, and I remember just laying in my bed being like, stop it. It doesn't work. Like that's not how you're going to deal with anything. You have to let yourself feel what you feel and let it release from you and flow out of you. And then all of a sudden it's just gone. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm okay.
Right.
But if you don't feel it, if you shove it down, then you're fighting with it. It's like you're wrestling with this dragon and you're never going to win,
Yeah.
It sucks forever, or it can suck, or it can cause, like, let's say you were saying, you have a breakup. Well, what if you have 15 breakups that all hurt and they were all the same thing, because you keep manifesting the same person into your life, just with a different face, right?
Yeah.
The exact same kind of person. And then you have this like 10-car pileup in your psyche of bad breakups, and you're completely convinced that that's the only way a relationship can go.
Yeah.
Completely convinced of it, right? But if you let yourself just feel it that one time, or every time it happens, and let it release and realize, like, it happens, I'm okay, then you won't continue to manifest it over and over again.
Yeah. And it really, and that's another reason why it's important to do shadow work, is because when you have this thing in your shadow, whatever it is, when you have this aspect or trauma or belief system, wound, whatever in your shadow, you will attract that thing in another person or situation. You will always be in situations that will trigger that part of you, because it's meant to be healed. You know what I mean? This is why and it can happen in different ways, because everybody's different. But the person or the girl that has really strict parents where she can't express her creativity, she will get with, in relationships where the guy is maybe super lazy, but super creative. You know what I mean? But maybe he's not even lazy. Maybe she just views him as lazy because she's super hardworking and he's not. And he takes time to do things that he finds pleasure in, right? And that's going to drive her nuts, because that's the part of her that she wasn't allowed to be. You know what I mean? And so she's going to take it out on him. And she's going to look at him like a threat. You know what I mean? Because that would mean accepting that is a part of her again. That would mean that, she would have to face the trauma with her parents, that she wasn't good enough the way that she was for her parents, that she was more of somebody that her parents wanted to mold and shape, and, that they wanted to control for their own, wants and desires and egos, because normally it's like the parent feels bad about their own life or has certain beliefs or shadows with them. So they project that onto the child. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, and then it keeps going. It's when we have a shadow, we always, and once again, I'll get more into how it plays out too, when we get to our own experiences, and I'm sure you will too. And I guess let's go over some last final ways to do shadow work. The first way that I ever did shadow work was, all I really did was write about my childhood, because I had somebody point out to me that I had an issue. I had an issue and I didn't see it at all. And I thought I had a good childhood. I don't know how, looking back now, but I literally thought my childhood was good, because I had a lot of people in my life that had really shitty childhoods, and I was comparing my childhood to theirs. And I would think, I guess it was like a humble thing, or maybe even a way to repress my own stuff. But I was like, some people didn't even have food or have their parents or whatever. At least I had parents and had a house and was taken care of financially, and my physical material needs were met and all that. But, but I wrote about my childhood. And in writing about my childhood, and I didn't think about it either. And this is what I always suggest people to do. Almost go into a trance when you're writing. Go into an automatic writing thing where you're not thinking about it. Start from your earliest memory and just start writing. Don't think about it. Just write whatever, whatever comes out, like you're writing the story of your life or something, the story of your childhood. And I normally, they say, I think the shadow, they always say it's best to look from like ages 5 to 7 or 8 or something. But I always tell people 0, newborn. Some people remember shit from when they were a newborn, but newborn to, I would even say like, 15, 16, you know what I mean? That's the time period I give because of my own experiences and what I've seen with other people. But the most crucial time when you're building your identity is newborn, I would say to 10, but it still can, your brain is still growing. So basically, write about your childhood, just write whatever comes out, whatever comes to you. And then after you're done, kind of take a second, relax, whatever, and then go back and read it and see if anything sticks out to you. Because when you write like that, you almost are allowing your subconscious to just remember for you. And that's what happened to me. When I went back and read, I was like, I got a lot of issues here that I didn't realize, you know what I mean? Like I was saying a lot of things that I didn't even think about, or that I don't think about consciously. That's a way, like we talked about, really focusing on your triggers and going into your triggers and like, why are they there? What's really triggering you? And I always ask people, what are you really afraid of here? And this involves a level of vulnerability. When you do shadow work, it really does involve a level of vulnerability and humility, because it really is almost like you're peeling back the layers, not only of yourself and your shadow, but your ego. Because the ego does not want to admit fault. It does not want to admit, there's a reason you hide this shit from yourself. You know what I mean? It makes you feel a certain type of way. And the ego wants to build the identity and project this good person. You know what I mean? And so it is in a way almost like an ego death. Like, no, your ego doesn't permanently die. But when you actually go through and really strip these things out and heal them, it really does feel like a piece of you died. It really does feel like an ego death, and you know it, it. And also go back and feel the things that you never felt, that you've been avoiding or running from, that you've been avoiding feeling in other situations, not just your childhood, but other situations. I also have people kind of like go back and go into like a meditation, like if they're really good with meditation, or meditation helps them to go into like a really meditative state, and to once you're in a good meditative state, go back to your childhood memories and relive them, re-experience them, re-feel them, but feel them all. You know what I mean? Feel them all, still feel them all. Feel all the things that you couldn't feel at that time, because not because you're this bad person or something. No, you're a child. You didn't know any better. You know what I mean? And so it's not like you're doing this to be hard on yourself, or you're doing this because you're fucked up. You're doing this to realize that you're not fucked up, like that, you have these things and that it's not fucked up and that it's okay. And you can integrate these things, you know what I mean? And be more authentic and be more in love with yourself, instead of constantly in conflict and separation and denial with yourself. You know what I mean? Because you could say from a different perspective, the other biggest problem in the world, other than people not looking at themselves, is self-love. Because if everybody loved themselves, then they'd love everybody else. You know what I mean? We treat others the way we treat ourselves. So somebody that's always treating someone like shit, that's how they talk to themselves internally. That's how they feel about themselves internally. And that person represents the part of them that they don't like. You know what I mean? It's always a reflection. And so yeah, those are, I think those are like all my big ways of kind of doing shadow work. Also, like I said, in our text, I don't talk about this a lot, but I do use psychedelics as a tool as well to do shadow work. I don't do it like, I'm not, like a like a psychedelic addict, if that is even something that you can. Apparently it is. I don't know if I guess with some you could be, but occasionally I've done ayahuasca and also, mushrooms, LSD, stuff like this. Occasionally when I have something really big that I need healing, but I don't necessarily recommend that to everybody, just because I feel like some people could be taking it for I've seen people take it for the wrong reasons. They take it because they're recovering addicts, which I'm a recovering addict, and they're actually not looking to heal something. They're actually looking to escape. And then they take it and they have a horrible trip, and then they're like, what the fuck? Because they weren't wanting to face their shit. They were wanting to escape, and it didn't do that. I would just say do it in a setting with maybe people that know what they're doing, like a shaman or, a retreat or something like that. Or if you know people that are very, like, do it responsibly, not just for recreational use. I don't consider or condone recreational use of psychedelic. I take psychedelics like really seriously, and I'm a big closet advocate for psychedelics. But so yeah, those are the ways that I can think of right now. And if I think of any more, I'll talk about it in part 2 on your channel, when I go over like our different experiences.
I would say that it's important to realize that there are steps to shadow work. It's not just one thing. I think that journaling is by far the best first step you can take for everybody. Yes. Absolutely. Journal. Write about your life, write about yourself, write about your past, write about your future also, and see how they align with each other. But really just like you were saying, and I'm sure this isn't true for everybody, but I find that if I'm writing by hand, it works so much better than if I'm sitting at a keyboard.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because you're really, by doing that, you are accessing more of your subconscious mind, and it will just start to flow, and you can just write, and it doesn't have to make sense. You're not writing for anybody else. You're writing for you, right? So it doesn't have to be anything that is presentable to anybody, but write about the things that bother you and trigger you and worry you, and write about your fears and your anxieties, and just getting them out on the page starts to open the doors to releasing this stuff. And it's like shadow work is like prying open these really heavy doors in your psyche, and writing is a great way to get that first crack in the door, right? And then once you get that first crack in, they start to kind of just open up more. And then there's advanced shadow work, like using psychedelics or like goetic path working. I find that tarot is a fantastic tool for me personally, to guide shadow work, because it's like cheating. Almost, it'll tell you what your issues are. If you're like having a hard time in the beginning recognizing what your issues are, tarot is a great tool for helping you discover what your issues are and what it is you need to face. But you have to take it seriously. You have to want to get better. You have to be ready to do this stuff. So if you feel like you're ready to do this stuff, then start by journaling. Absolutely. And then move on to other tools or other methods. Meditation, meditation is hard, but it's worth doing. It's worth getting into that level of inward clarity. It's absolutely worth it.
I always recommend writing to people too. And another thing that I would add really quick is acceptance is a big, big thing. When you get to that, when you find out what it is that you're avoiding, that you're scared of, the trauma, where it started, the root of it, a lot of the times, most people I find, it can be simplified by the term not good enough. A lot of people struggle with not being good enough. It manifests in different ways, but it always has something to do with unworthiness or not being good enough, some kind of insecurity that we really don't want to admit, because if we admitted that, it would like literally feel like hell. And so what I have people do is to face that, to accept that. And it sounds very counterintuitive because you've been running from it for so long. Like, why would you want to accept that you feel not good enough? Why would you want to accept that about yourself? Well, there is a part of you that feels that way. It doesn't matter if it's logically true or not. You know what I mean? Logically, yeah, it's probably not true. You know what I mean? It's just, that's how you feel. But when you get to that point where you're face to face with that feeling, and if you fight it, you know what I mean? That defeats the purpose. We're trying to integrate it. So you have to find a way to accept and become okay with that feeling. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to walk around feeling not good enough, because what actually happens, it's a beautiful thing when you actually take that feeling in as a part of you and treat it almost like a child, because it really is the childhood self in you that feels that way. You know what I mean? That's manifesting in all these other crazy ways in your life right now. When you take that in almost like a child and you accept it and you nurture it, you faced it. So you're no longer scared of it because you've accepted it. So you're not avoiding it or running it from it anymore. And then afterwards, you actually have all these realizations that Every time that happens, every time you accept that shitty, icky feeling, that thing, that belief system, that trauma that you've been running from, it's almost like you accept it. It hurts for a second, but you also feel this sense of surrender and release and relief. And it's like a huge, something huge has been taken off of you. And, maybe you cry for a little bit, maybe you feel a little weird for a little bit, but eventually you start feeling empowered and you actually start realizing what true power is. And I always tell people this, like, true power is actually vulnerability, because everything is counterintuitive. You know what I mean? Everything in this world seems to be counterintuitive. When true power is actually in vulnerability, because in that vulnerable state, when you accept that vulnerable state, you're not fighting anything. You're not running from anything. Therefore, you have all the power. You know what I mean? Therefore, you're completely free. You've accepted and faced your fear. So therefore, you're not running from it anymore. You know what I mean? And that builds confidence. All shadow work simultaneously heals so much other manifestations. Lack of confidence, you know what I mean? Relationship issues, poor self-esteem, creative block, like work issues, making money. It's crazy. Like it goes into every aspect of your life and you don't even realize it till you do it. But when you face that core root fear and you get to the root, which another thing that I suggest people do is the whys. I call it the whys game. It's something I kind of thought of and made up, but it's like a kid in the car on vacation. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? When you do the writing and you're like, okay, you write down the problem. Why am I feeling this way? Like, you write down the problem, then you ask yourself, why? And you answer the why. You ask yourself why again. And you keep doing it until you get to the root of the issue. And that can really help you kind of bypass all the shit your ego is going to throw at you. You know what I mean? Because it's going to try to tell you, like, this bitch over here doesn't know what she's doing. That's why. You know what I mean? Instead of actually like saying, well, she's making me feel really bad about myself and I don't want to admit that. You know what I mean? So that can really help you bypass some things too. Once you face that scary thing inside of you you've been running from for all those years, there's such a power that comes with it and a liberation. And it's not like a power of like, oh, I can control some shit now and I can, take over some people now. It's not like a conceited or toxic power. It's like a true divine power that and a confidence that really overcomes you. And don't get discouraged either, I want to say, because there can be a level to working on something and feeling like you made a lot of progress and then like you do good for a little bit and then like it comes back later on. You know what I mean? And this has happened to me so many times. I'm like, damn it, I thought I fucking healed that, man. But like I said, it's layers. You know what I mean? It's layers. And each layer you get more, it gets more profound and you heal more and you shed more. And you start seeing the results almost immediately when you start doing this. You know what I mean? It's just, you have to start. You have to be willing, and you have to be willing to look at those parts of yourself, and which can be scary, but is also very rewarding and freeing and liberating when it comes down to it. So anyways, so if you don't have anything else to say, then I guess we will. Do you still want to do part 2 on your channel right now?
Yeah, I'm down if you are.
Okay. I am too. I just wanted to make sure in case you were like, damn, I need to fucking go. This bitch
This is great.
Me nuts.
No, not at all.
Okay. All right. So we're going to do part 2 on your channel. I will link your channel, The Order of Chaos, down below for everybody so they can go check out part 2 if they want to hear more about all of this and they're not sick of us yet. We're going to basically, in part 2, we're going to talk about our experiences with shadow work and go a little bit deeper into experiences that we've had with shadow work and how it has kind of played out personally for us. And yeah, so if you're interested, then head over to part 2.